Black Shark 3 Pro is not a new phone. In fact, with the release of the ROG Phone 3, which has the Snapdragon 865 Plus, it's already outdated. In fact, for the modern industry, it was outdated a long time ago, especially the moment it was released. However, me as a non-gamer, why would I buy a gaming phone? Let's find out. Spoiler, it's for the screen. So let's bring up the screen. A lot of people say the screen is too big. However, if you've used a e-reader, or if you've used a electronic ink device for taking notes, you would know that this is not really the case. Here's a side-by-side comparison with my Kindle. Here's also a side-by-side comparison with my older Zen Phone 3, and with my LG V50s. Here's one with the double screen. As you can see, I think that it's been overly exaggerated how big this phone really is. I mean, it's perfectly well balanced. You don't have much of a problem of it tilting too much to the back or to the front. So I think that most people that complain that, oh, it's very hard to hold this phone, are just not used to holding other things other than small phones. Especially if you grew up in the 90s where our phones were basically this size anyway or bigger and they could only text and call. By that regard, this is not that big of a phone. And having the large screen size on this phone, in fact, is an advantage. It's not something that should be seen as a disadvantage. Now you might be wondering to yourself, hold on, didn't you just buy a V50s? How much money are you actually throwing away for these videos? Not a lot, I can tell you. To be fair, okay, sure, the V50s, I love the V50s. I got it especially for the double screen. It increases my productivity. It increases the amount of work I can do. And just generally how my brain works, especially since I don't need to split screen things. But there is one problem with my V50s. At some point between this video and my last video, it actually died on me. I got into a boot loop where it kept shutting down every time I plugged it into the charger. Wireless charging worked fine, but not being able to charge the phone normally. And oh yeah, this seemed to be like a USB issue, so it also was a problem with the dual screen. I couldn't use the dual screen. It kind of just removed the whole point of having that phone, considering I bought that phone for the dual screen. So that's what happened there. And this is why I decided to buy this Black Shark 3 for the 7.1-inch screen size. So a few things I want to cover. You should know by now, if you're subbed to the channel or if you know me, that I like using my phone as an all-arounder device. Meaning I also use it as a occasional e-reader when I'm out and I don't really have the time to bring my Kindle with me. And I also like using it as a note. So you might be asking, why didn't you just buy the Galaxy Note 20 Ultra, or the Note 20 Normal, or the Note 20, or the Note 10? Well, first of all, this may apply primarily here, but it'll also apply to several global regions. This is an Exynos region, which means you're losing a lot of power, which we should have gotten with the Snapdragon 865 or the 865 Plus for the Note 20 Ultra Plus. However, being an Exynos region, we're still stuck at the Exynos 990, which means that the whole point of buying a new Samsung, well, aside from having the DeX mode, which I'll get into a bit, is that you can use the phone as a note, because it is called a note, and for having a superior processor. That's the whole point that we even upgrade these phones every year or two. In my case, maybe 3 years, except for this phone that I got specifically right now. So here's the thing. If you're getting a Samsung phone in the Philippines, you're getting an Exynos chip. And you can Google right now Exynos Samsung chip versus the Snapdragon chip, and you will see that you have lost a lot of performance and a lot of battery life just because you have an Exynos chip in your system. And so it doesn't make sense for me to buy an Exynos region chip here if I'm going to use it for notes, considering the amount of performance I've lost. Especially considering that the Black Shark 3 Pro, not even the regular version, the Pro, again because of the large screen, is around 44,000 pesos. And the Samsung Note 20 Ultra, which is something I would have wanted if I had the Snapdragon chip, is 73,000 pesos, again with the Exynos chip. So this is a very bad deal for your money to begin with. And you might be complaining, well, okay, you bought a gaming phone, but you're not even gonna game on it. and there's no place to store your stylus. Where do you even store your stylus? Here's the thing. You're in Asia. So, I mean, first of all, carry-on bags are a thing here. Body bags, phone holsters, fanny packs, man purses, whatever you want to call them. Come on. This is a normal fashion statement here. Everybody has one. And so I don't think you should be carrying these new phones anyway, which people complaining are overly sized, in your pocket. Just put it in your bag. Put it in your holster. Put it in one of these body bags. I mean, I may not be the best model for these things, but there are very, very fashionable and good-looking people that pull this look off. So you should probably just get with that look right now. Catch up. It's 2020 already. Okay, so I mentioned the phone as a note-taking device. And you will need a separate stylus, again, which you can store in your holster or your fanny pack, whatever you want to call it. It's still a lot cheaper and a lot easier to use this phone if you're going to be using a stylus in the first place. So, the writing experience is not bad with my Onenote Jot 3. As you can see here on the screen, there's very, very little delay. Maybe not as much minimal delay as what if you got a Samsung Snapdragon chip, but I'm going to bring you back to my last statement about serviceability, which the whole reason I couldn't fix the LG V50S here was because they don't service it here and I have to send it to Korea. And because, again, this is an Exynos region, if you bought a Snapdragon 865 Samsung phone, it would not be serviceable in the Philippines, and you would also need to ship it abroad for it to be serviced. So that removes altogether the usability of this phone. If it starts to screw up or it has any problems, it would take months, especially during the lockdown and COVID, for it just to be fixed. And you would not have a phone on you in the meantime. Again, why I bought this phone. So, knowing this phone's 7.1-inch screen is very much an advantage. Now, it takes a little bit of getting used to going back to the split screen, whereas originally I was already used to the dual screen. But not as much as you think, especially if you set it to auto-rotate off, wherein the moment you flip your phone into horizontal mode, it's very easy to maneuver around the screen, and you can still use the Takobon dictionary and using the writing app on the right side. In this case, I've switched to Onenote simply because this does not have the LG Notes app pre-installed into it. For pure writing experience, I would recommend the Bamboo Note, or I think the Bamboo Note app. However, that does not have split screen capability, so you're only going to be able to use it for browsing and practicing by using probably the OneNote or just a regular notepad with the writing instructions on the other screen. Also, I thought I should mention that here's a nifty trick I found out with Microsoft OneNote. Not only does it automatically synchronize your sticky notes with your computer, when you make a notebook notepad separately on this app, you're actually able to go into camera mode and select document, which will then layer out whatever the picture is. So this example, I'll show you right now. This is the book that I'm using to fill in my worksheets for Japanese studies. And by clicking into document, I'm able to just focus into it, and it automatically brings it up into a document, which you can then zoom into and then fill out manually, which is a very useful, interface in, my opinion. And the 48 megapixel, which comes in the Black Shark 3, well, I have to admit, it's not the best for taking photos, but as an all-rounder, this goes a perfectly good job of being able to capture worksheets, which you can then fill up on your phone. And, it just saves you a lot of paperwork and, well, I guess carbon emissions. This is one of the things it'll save you on with the production of paper. Let's talk a little bit more about the writing experience on this phone, though. And in that case, also the reading experience. Now, admittedly, none of these phones, in my opinion, has any competition with e-ink phones and, dedicated e-ink tablets or e-ink writing hardware. And if you were getting something specifically for the writing and reading experience, you want to stick to e-ink. And of course, this is like the Kindle, or you could get the Kobo. It's the other joint. You can even get one of these Onyx tabs, which is also a writing thing and has a much better interface, and it's less harsh to your eyes than a regular smartphone, no matter how good the display is. Of course, these smartphones do have a reading mode, or more scientifically, or in layman's terms, the blue light filter before they gave all these fancy names to it. But it's still not as good as e-ink. Of course, you can always choose to get one of the Hisense Android smartphones, easily just get it in Banggood or AliExpress. But as an all-rounder, this screen, I think, would be just as good as the Galaxy Samsung screens if you're going to be using it for note-taking. Again, if you want to just take note-taking anyway, Remarkable Tab or an Onyx Books tablet. So much better for writing and reading. But the phone does what it does, and it's good enough just if you're going to use it for a all-rounder note-taking device. I'd also like to mention that the 865 processor and this 12 gigs of RAM, I'm not sure specifically what the combination was, but on regular benchmarks it says that the 865 is only about 20 to 25% faster in the use of, speed. However, when I encoded video on this phone, it's very drastically different than the 855. Where in the 855, my 15-minute video took an hour. On this phone, which is only supposed to be 25% faster, video encoding only took 30 minutes, sometimes below 30 minutes, like around 25 minutes, for the same 15-minute video. So obviously, benchmarks aren't everything. And it's a pleasant surprise to know that this phone can encode and do videos a lot faster than an 855 chipset. Not specifically all the 855 chipsets, as there are certain combinations of RAM and SoC. However, it is much faster than my LG V50S. Bringing up the LG V50S again, the split screen does work just as well, just because of this phone size. The screen size, to be specific. Here again is a comparison with my old Zenfone 3, and you see, this phone, when overlaid with it, because of the size of these older phones, it actually takes up about 60 to 65% of the total screen size of an older phone. So if you're going to be using two apps at the same time, it actually kind of works the same way as having two older phones, or just having 50% screen size on what you would have if you had a double screen. And this only works because of the 7.1-inch screen, and because of the resolution of the 7.1-inch screen. Also, as an added bonus, it runs Citra pretty well. I mean, here it is showing Pokemon X on Citra on the split screen, of course. And it runs really, really well, as long as you're okay with the 1x resolution. Some games might lag on 2x resolution. Of course, some games will be perfectly fine on 2x resolution with a very minimal lag in audio. But again, that's not really what I do most of the time. I spend most of my time writing and using this phone for taking notes and for encoding as an overall universal use phone. Which then will lead me to some of the cons of this phone. First of all, this phone does not have a desktop mode, not even the LG experimental desktop mode, or a USB 3 or 3.1 interface, which will allow you to install a independent desktop mode, which you can actually get off Google. Just Google it right now. Independent desktop mode, Android phones. So it's, if you're using your phone connecting to a Next dock, or if you're using it with a portable monitor in desktop mode, this is actually one of the disadvantages of having this phone. You can't use desktop mode, which, considering it has a Snapdragon 865 chipset, I think most modern phones should probably just have a built-in desktop mode. But that's just me. And that's just my opinion on how this technology works, because they're overpowered pocket computers already. And I just feel that personally, all of the current flagship chipsets should have a desktop mode. But we might have to wait a few more years for that. And this phone does not have a desktop mode. And it also does not allow for USB connection to a wireless monitor for screen mirroring, which could be a deal breaker for some of you. So that's one of the main cons of this phone. Another con for this phone is it does not have wireless charging. So unlike the LG phones and some of the Samsung phones, actually most of the phones nowadays that do have built-in wireless charging, this doesn't have wireless charging, so it's not as convenient. But as an environmentalist, it is, well, they've shown graphs that wireless charging does use up more electricity and you use a lot more electricity, which is kind of bad for the environment, especially if you're concerned about green energy. But it's, as a technical standpoint, that's still something that is kind of annoying not to have in 2020 when most of these phones should have wireless charging. One thing that does work for this phone though is the 65-watt hypercharge, which is really, really fast, and it's changed the way that I charge my phone and how I use my phone. Where this phone will drop to occasionally about 60% and I just take a shower, and by the time I get out it's back to 90 again. So my charging habits have changed since I've been using this phone. And I feel this is heavily understated how important fast charging is nowadays, especially with most phone batteries being built in and, not interchangeable. So it's something that I woke up to, and now I don't think I can live with a phone that charges at a very slow rate anymore, considering how fast this phone actually charges. Let's move up again to something that's kind of a pro for this phone, which I almost forgot to cover. This phone has a 90 Hertz refresh rate, which I came from a 60 Hertz refresh rate, and of course it's not as good as 120 Hertz, but you will notice the smoothness of this phone, especially if you're coming from a 60 Hertz phone. So much so that I now walk around in real life and it's like the 90 Hertz refresh rate from the phone translated to real life, where I now can see people dynamically moving. I know that's a little insane. My brain's probably screwing up. However, I also want to cover the cinematic mode that this phone has built in. Of course, you can turn it off if you don't like it, and a lot of people don't like it because it ruins the movie experience. But as somebody that watches a lot of anime and a lot of K-drama, this is really, really good. It feels like standard content which you watch on a television in cinematic mode just makes everything seem to pop out. It's a lot more real, especially if you like watching nature documentaries, which I occasionally do. So I think I should mention that built-in cinematic software that's just built into this phone is, for me personally, kind of a good thing. It's great. I love using it, and I don't think I'm ever going to turn it off. Unless maybe if I'm watching Pacific Rim, because it makes the robots look cheap. So that's it, guys. At the price range that the Black Shark 3 Pro is being offered, I think it is a perfect alternative to the Samsung S20 and the Samsung Note Ultra that's currently being offered in the Philippines, especially since they are stuck on the Exynos chipsets and does not have the Snapdragon power which you're normally expecting from the international version of these phones. But what do you guys think of my use of this phone? Is it weird? Would there have been a better smartphone that I could have purchased with my money that still meets the needs I use for this smartphone? Let me know in the comments what you guys think. And if you like this video, feel free to subscribe, feel free to like, dislike, and as always, there is a Patreon down below if you'd like to contribute to the making of these videos. Hope you enjoyed that. I'll see you next week.